Well, good morning. I'm Angie Onyewuchi, President and CEO of Travel Salem, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. Today's Fly Salem Forum is brought to you by the Fly Salem Steering Committee, the Salem Area Chamber of Commerce, SEDCOR, and Travel Salem. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Tom Hoffert with the Chamber and Eric Anderson with SEDCOR for supporting today's conversation. We're delighted to convene today to bring you updates on efforts to recruit regional commercial air service to Salem's McNary Field. In 2008, Salem had flights to Salt Lake City via Delta, but the service was canceled when the price per barrel plummeted and Delta was forced to pull out of small markets and regional markets. But let's not forget, according to Delta, Salem was the most successful small market launch they had ever had, and we know we can do it again. We believe the stars are aligning for us to secure commercial air service, and believe it or not, our chances have greatly improved because of the pandemic. Roughly 1 month ago, Brent DeHart, our consultant Jack Penning, and myself traveled to SkyWest Hub in St. George, Utah to dive deep into discussions about starting service here in Salem. SkyWest's campus was closed, and yet we were the only in-person meeting they took for the month of January. The conversations were promising, and they're convinced of the value of our market. You'll hear more about the details today. I know we're all excited for the chance to fly out of Salem and connect to destinations across the globe, and that's worthy of securing commercial air service in and of itself. But we should also be thrilled for the chance to leverage inbound flights that create a destination that is not only a prime West Coast drive market, but a prime fly market as well. We have some exciting opportunities coming in the short term, including Ironman and the 2022 World Games. Wouldn't it be amazing for folks to be able to fly directly into Oregon's wine country and capital city to experience world-class recreation, culinary, and cultural heritage? Salem is the largest capital metro city in the US without commercial air service. Let me say it again. We are the largest capital city in the US without commercial air service, and it's time we change that. It will take all of us to make this happen. We've secured roughly $700,000 in pledges toward a market revenue guarantee, which is needed to bring a carrier to the region. But we need to have $1 million to make this dream a reality. So far, all of our pledges are from private sources, individuals like you, local businesses, and others who see the potential and are willing to put skin in the game. This is pure economic development at its finest. Securing commercial air service would be like dropping a Fortune 500 company in the middle of our region. The positive impact and job creation would be staggering and would filter out to every corner of our economy. If you're interested in joining us and making a pledge, please contact me directly at Travel Salem. We're ready to get this done. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce my partners who will dazzle you with the latest data that shows our undeniable position as a prime market for commercial air service. I know you'll be as excited as I am by the end of this forum. Our moderator for today's Fly Salem Forum is Brent DeHart. He's lived in Salem for 31 years with his wife, Linda, and they've raised their 2 boys here. He's owned 3 different gasoline stations, adding Salem Aviation Fueling in 2003. He's worked as a financial advisor and life and disability insurance specialist for the last 10 years. He was president of Oregon Gasoline Dealers Association. He served on Salem City Council from 2004 to 2008. He's the past president of the Salem Chamber and a current board member of SEDCOR. And he's the host of Newsmakers radio show on KYKN for the last 2.5 years. And in his free time, he was a Little League coach and on an advisory committee for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Our presenter today is Jack Penning. For 2 decades, Jack has been considered a leading expert in air service development, strategic business planning, and airport marketing. In 2017, Jack joined 3 other partners in founding Volaire Aviation Consulting. Today, Volaire has 9 team members and works with more than 100 airports in North America. Jack is well known and respected by airline network partners and planners. His business cases for new service have led to the initiation of more than 100 new routes since Volaire's founding, including 26 new routes announced in the last 7 weeks, and actually 1 this morning as well, in the midst of this pandemic. An expert in grant development, Jack has won more than $20 million in grant funding for our air service development projects, both at the federal and state levels. Before moving to consulting, Jack was the aviation reporter for KGW TV, the NBC affiliate in Portland. He was honored with both Emmy and Edward R. Murrow awards for his journalism. Jack earned his Bachelor's of Science degree from the University of Illinois. He and his wife live in Portland's West Hills. As we get started today, I'd like my colleague Brandon Lawrence to explain how today's forum will work. We want to make sure we hear from you and can answer all of your questions. Brandon?
Yes, thank you, Angie. My name is Brandon Lawrence, Director of Membership here at Travel Salem. We are so excited to have everyone here today. We're really excited for a great conversation about bringing commercial air service to Salem. A couple notes about the webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So you'll see a Q&A widget on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to ask any questions of the panelists, and we'll make sure they get answered at the end. We also have a chat feature as well. If you'd like to say hi, let us know you're here. Feel free to use the chat function. And if you want it directed to all attendees, make sure to click all panelists and attendees. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to turn it over now to Brent DeHart. Brent.
All right, thank you. Angie, it was a nice introduction. I'm sure nobody's tuning in to hear me talk. So let's get right to all the nitty gritty and all the data and the information from our expert, Jack Penning. Jack, thanks for being here. I know you've got a presentation to give all the data and the update for everyone. I'll handle and filter and pass you questions, hopefully after the end of the presentation, but if something's urgent, I'll butt in.
Sounds great. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Brandon. Thank all of you for being here. I am normally just 60 miles north of you in Portland. Today, I'm about 2,500 miles to the southeast. I had to quickly fly out here yesterday to Destin, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, where we announced brand new service on Southwest entering this market for the first time. And so it was a big honor to be invited to the celebration today. And that's why I'm not in Oregon. I can tell you these things take time. Air service development, this particular project to get Southwest into this market, we began in 2008. So 13 years later and a pandemic, we have finally secured Southwest service to 4 cities. So some of the projects go more quickly than others. Some take quite a bit of time, but that 4 more routes today, now that's 30 routes that we've been able to recruit this year so far. So what we found is the pandemic is creating, as we said in a similar meeting about 12 months ago in Salem, the pandemic would create opportunity. We said it has absolutely created opportunity as airlines shuffle their networks and fly to different places. So I'm going to share with you basically where we are with our Salem effort, and hopefully when I get this up to full screen here, everyone will be able to see it pretty clearly. And we will, you all can see that. Give me a thumbs up, Brent. Good? Good. Okay. Excellent. So we want to talk about what's going on in the industry and also basically our progress in Salem, where we've come over the last 12 months or so and where we think we're going from here. So demand is still extremely depressed, but we have actually seen it improve over the last 2 weeks. So we were running at around 35% of previous peak demand through all of last fall. We saw a peak at Christmas time, but it was not sustained into January. But since just before President's Day, we've been consistently seeing demand around 46% of where it was in 2019. What this is telling us, and if we look at where these pockets of demand are happening, it's happening in places where there is significant vaccine take up. So where a lot of people have been vaccinated at least once, we're seeing bookings increase and we're seeing throughput increase. So as cases collapse, we've seen a huge decrease in cases, thankfully, and as vaccinations increase, we are seeing people get back on the road. Now, this is still primarily leisure travel, which explains why Southwest is spending its time at a place like Destin and Fort Walton Beach today. We haven't seen the business travel come back yet, but there is encouraging data that shows us it's on the way. Airlines are adding lots and lots of routes. Before today, airlines had added 194 new routes since the pandemic started. You'll note they're almost all leisure routes. They're not really, there's zero business travel aside from a few people like me who are still traveling pretty much every week. Most people are staying home unless they're trying to get away for leisure travel. What we're seeing though is there's massive pent up demand, and what airlines are doing is pulling down business markets to add service in leisure markets. Medford's a good example. We've seen all of its service transition into basically things like Orange County, which was just announced last month, just started this month. Anything to take advantage of the demand that is still available is what airlines are doing. Now, those 190 plus new routes have been added, but airlines have cut over 730 routes out of their network. These are those business markets. You'll note Eugene, Portland doesn't exist anymore. We've seen a loss all throughout the West, but no part of the country is really immune from the loss of service. Airlines are taking that movable asset and they're putting it wherever they can to generate cash flow. So the bar is a little bit lower for things that work because you don't need to cover all expenses, but just your marginal operating cost essentially is all you're looking to try and cover. But you need to have a market that generates either outbound or inbound leisure in order to essentially take advantage of the little bit of demand that is there today. And so you'll see this is heavily skewed. Southern California, Florida, the Gulf Coast. Those markets have seen the largest increase in service. The Northwest hasn't seen too many routes canceled, but at the same time, very little added. To date, 35 airlines since last March have either declared bankruptcy or have completely shut down, including regional carriers that could have potentially been regional carriers that would have flown to Salem. Compass flew as a regional carrier under the Delta brand. ExpressJet flew under Delta and United brand. Transstate flew under United and American brand. All of those airlines are completely liquidated. So those jets essentially are sitting in the desert with no use. Many, many more airlines are in bankruptcy. This list grows. This is not all of them, especially in places where the government aid has not been sufficient. We've seen airlines go bankrupt. What this creates, though, is essentially, to put it in, a Darwin kind of way, a thinning of the herd, and the weakest of the airlines have been removed. The strongest of the airlines remain, and now those strong airlines are able to go out and potentially access assets that are very, very inexpensive, and to place those assets in places for the post-pandemic that they know they can make money by leveraging that cheap asset. Airlines, this is by far a record, lost in North America $42 billion in 2020. And that is after the $30 billion they received in aid. So without the aid, they would have lost over $70 billion in 1 year. Put that in perspective, the $42 billion they lost in 2020 is enough to wipe out every single dime of profit they made since 1930. So they lost more in 1 year than they made from 1930 to 2019. So there's been a lot of criticism about how airlines deploy their assets. It really didn't matter when it came down to it because the losses were so staggering. But I highlight here SkyWest, who Angie mentioned that we have met with in person very, very recently, nearly broke even. They had a positive operating margin. They nearly broke even. And that's because generally they get paid per departure by a carrier that they operate for, rather than having to get paid per passenger like most airlines. Allegiant, which is a low cost, less than daily, they were very close to a break even. If they had essentially one more person per flight throughout the year, they would have broken even. That's how close they were. They need one more passenger per flight. So those two are in an excellent position to take advantage of post-pandemic dynamics to grow in the post-pandemic and to squeeze out other competitors. So I think, there is hope, even though the numbers are bleak, that some of these airlines actually are in pretty good shape considering. In the state of Oregon, airlines have pulled down or will pull down for 2021 about half of the capacity that they were scheduled to operate. So generally, we would have expected about 28 to 30 million seats in Oregon for 2021. Instead, it will be closer to 15 million. Oregon has lost 18,000 plus departing seats per day. 18,000 a day. And the service that we're talking about in Salem would replace 100 of those. So an exceptionally small number of seats that would be replaced by having service in Salem. And so I think it's important to point out that what we are attempting to do now is different than what we were attempting to do before the pandemic, because we were attempting to add seats to a overall Willamette Valley market that was growing very, very quickly. Portland was growing quickly. Eugene had been gaining seats. We were trying to squeeze into that market. Now, Portland and Eugene have lost tons of capacity. We're trying to replace that capacity at our airport. And so we aren't trying to necessarily change habits. We're not trying to pull people away from seats that would be at other airports. We're just trying to replace those seats in a more convenient place for a large proportion of the population. Salem is, after all, the second largest MSA in the state of Oregon. So with the capacity down 48%, Portland has lost 21 nonstop markets. And it's the network carriers that are really in retreat. In Portland in particular, it's Alaska and Delta. Alaska, I'm sure if any of you have traveled or looked at traveling, Alaska has essentially pulled down its hub operation at Portland. The way it had been scheduled before the pandemic was with what we call banks of flights. So flights came in from the Northwest, they would feed the longer haul flights, which would come back and then feed those passengers back to regional markets in the Northwest. Now the schedule is entirely focused on local Portland traffic without connections. And so Portland, without that connecting traffic, can't begin to support the number of seats it had before. This also means for the Salem traveler, it's a lot harder to get a nonstop to the city that you were traveling to than it was before. In all likelihood, even if you fly out of Portland, you're going to have to make a connection to get where you're going in many, many of the markets that you're traveling to. You're going to have to make a connection probably if you're flying out of Salem if we secure service, but you're not losing anything because you can either drive to Portland and still make a connection, or you can just fly out of Salem and make the same connection. So this has made our service more viable over the long term. I think that's really, really important to keep in mind. Allegiant, meanwhile, has been expanding like mad. That VPS down in the Florida Panhandle is where I'm sitting in the airport right now, and you can see Allegiant continues to add flights here. One reason Southwest decided to muscle in. But the one I want to point out is Allegiant is launching service to Portland. This is very far outside of their typical business model, which is to take people from smaller communities to vacation destinations like LA, like Orlando, like San Diego. What Allegiant is doing is they see weakness in Alaska and in how they're handling the Portland market, and Allegiant is trying to pull passengers away from Alaska. So Alaska's retreat and other network carrier retreat in Portland is creating opportunity for low-cost carriers that wouldn't have existed before. So that changes the dynamic of how we have to recruit Allegiant, knowing now they're about 60 miles up the road in Portland. So there are consequences that help with the pandemic and help us recruit service and our ability to support service. But there are other consequences that allow carriers that would have never thought of certain types of expansion to try things they never would have done before that could potentially divert resources away from Salem. We had an excellent meeting with Allegiant in the fall, and we're feeling very good. After Alaska retreated at Portland, though, that became low-hanging fruit for an airline like Allegiant. So it pushes our opportunity not off the table, but it pushes it farther away as these bigger city opportunities present themselves. This is all very dynamic, as you can see, and hopefully I'm explaining it clearly enough so you can understand. We're not just competing against Portland or Eugene for capacity. Salem is competing against Norfolk and Bangor and Grand Rapids and St. Cloud, Minnesota, because these planes can go anywhere in the country. And we have to make the case we're better than any of those other options. If you look at Portland, the thing to look at here, it's a lot of numbers. Don't mean to try and overwhelm, but if you look at the highlighted area, by last April, Portland passengers were down 95%, and they have not recovered. They were still down almost 70% in January. So Portland has not recovered really to the point of anyone else in the country. Nationally, like I said, we're back to 46%, but Portland is still running about 30% of normal. So Portland traffic hasn't come back. Here in Destin, we're at 83% of normal already. So it's those type of areas that are getting the most attention right now. Eugene was on an encouraging trend and then has started suffering again. Eugene was almost back to half of normal by November and then has collapsed again, primarily because of Oregon's enhanced containment measures for the virus. That really caused traffic to collapse over the holidays in Oregon. And so Oregon has been harder hit than many other areas. At the same time, Oregon's cases have been significantly lower than almost anywhere. So it's worked to keep people safe, but it has really damaged the aviation industry in the state of Oregon. The good news is, as I mentioned, cases are falling worldwide. That top one is North America, and you can see the drastic decline in cases that continues to this day. The South American variant that we were so worried about, it turns out to not be as contagious, according to the New York Times, as was thought, and you can see their cases have stabilized. Europe is going down. Asia, Africa, Australia, those have been low relative to the rest of the world per 100,000 residents for this whole period. But as the cases go down, we're seeing booking trends change. And so over the rolling last 4 weeks, bookings into computer reservation systems for airline tickets are twice as much as the previous 4 weeks. So bookings have doubled in just the last 4 weeks, especially in places where we have seen high penetration of vaccinations. As people get vaccinated, they are booking aspirational trips. We are also seeing the booking window, which had been very tight. People were planning, maybe I can go to Palm Springs this weekend. Let's book a ticket on Thursday for Friday. Now we're seeing bookings coming in for summer, which we haven't seen in 12 months. So people are anticipating being vaccinated. They're anticipating travel being safer, at least feeling safer than they were before. And because of that, people are booking much more. As we see these trends, airlines are going to more aggressively try to increase capacity and get new capacity in place. And you look at our Oregon trends, again, hospitalizations way down, cases way down. In Oregon, bookings have not increased at that double level, but we are seeing a slight increase in bookings. Oregon and Washington are tending to lag, where in Idaho, we're seeing bookings 3 and 4 times what they were before. So it just kind of essentially depends on where you are and how the virus is reacting as to how bookings go. The great news, it's actually up over 60 million Americans now have had at least one dose. About 7% of Americans are completely vaccinated and beyond their 2-week waiting period from the second vaccine. The bad news is that the majority of vaccines that we're giving out today are second vaccines, and we're getting very few new vaccinated. And there are a lot of arguments to be made for both ways, but essentially our new vaccinations are dropping really, really quickly because we're soaking up all of our vaccines, ensuring people have 2, and we're not able to do both at the same time. You'll also note the West hasn't, the West Coast hasn't had as good of vaccination penetration as the Midwest. I was doing some work in northern Wisconsin earlier this week, and there we've seen up to 20% of the population has been vaccinated, and our bookings in that market have quadrupled because of it. So vaccination is the key to passengers returning. The second key is the world needs to open up. Everything you see in red is at least partially closed. And by partially, frankly, it's closed for all intents and purposes. You can't really go to the UK unless you've got UK citizenship or residency and you have a legitimate reason that you have to travel back there, but you can if you have all of that. And so it looks pink instead of red, where it's really not that way. If you're going down to Mexico, you got to get tested on your way back. So that has really choked a lot of travel to Mexico between the US, and Canada is, for all intents and purposes, completely closed. So until some of those borders open, a lot of traffic is going to sit on the sideline. Domestic, though, is where the recovery is going to happen, and that certainly helps in any kind of destination, especially one where you can be outdoors and you can drink wine and you can go to a coast and you can go hike waterfalls, which is everything around Salem. So our main targets for air service, even through the pandemic, really have not changed. We've been in discussions with all of these carriers at one point or another, some more active than others, but we've talked consistently about recruiting service to San Francisco, network connecting service on the United code operated by SkyWest, same with Denver. We've talked about Alaska coded service to Seattle, and Allegiant less than daily, twice a week service to places that people want to take a vacation. And frankly, we're seeing a lot of people reverse vacation out of these cities. I work for Idaho Falls, Idaho over the summer and fall. 60% of the traffic Allegiant carried there was coming from Vegas and Phoenix, taking vacations up in Idaho, in Montana, and in Wyoming. And so there's a lot of traffic to leverage out of those places that bring in tourists to the Pacific Northwest. The recovery is still unclear because we are going to need nearly full vaccination to really feel fully recovered. SkyWest right now, without basically talking about anything that's completely confidential in their business plan, they're determining how big they want their fleet to be. They've got about 50 plus aircraft that are sitting idle. They all need maintenance work that costs a significant amount of money per frame. So what they're trying to do, and why it was important for us to continue to make our case, is they're trying to determine how many of those planes they want to keep in the fleet. If there is a business case to be made, they can keep them all in the fleet. If there's not, they can get rid of them all. But they want to see how that recovery is going to manifest itself. For Allegiant, we have delivered a detailed cost proposal, working with the city. And city has been very, very supportive of our efforts in ensuring that we have a very low cost facility for carriers. They got that opportunity to enter Portland, and they did. We'll see how that works out for them. Portland, of course, is a very expensive airport to operate at relative to Salem. It costs for every person they put on a plane about $15 more to get that person on the plane, just in airport fees. So with low fares, sometimes that economic math doesn't work out. Allegiant has been adding service, though. They added Medford, Orange County. Medford is one of my markets. They also just announced Pasco, Washington to San Diego. That's one of my markets. We've seen them consistently adding service. And they're going to add 14 new planes in third and fourth quarter. So there will be further opportunity there. Alaska has drastically reduced its regional service, pulling many, many planes out of service. And it's kind of in the same situation as SkyWest, trying to figure out how many of those planes should we keep flying. That could create an opportunity, though, because if Alaska decides to reactivate the majority of its regional fleet, it may not need to operate 6 flights a day from Portland to Medford. 4 flights a day might suffice, which could create room in the aircraft schedule for something like a Salem, Seattle. But they also could choose to retire those planes and reduce the regional footprint. So there is, a lot of strategic planning going on at these carriers, and we continue to make our case. So what we're doing right now in Salem, we're assessing that return of travelers. Surveys showed that we were at about 50% of previous demand. So we have a little bit more demand for travel than the national average. So that was encouraging. We have put in our small community air service grant application. This is an application to the federal government for funding. It is due on March 1st. We went ahead and submitted yesterday. The city submits that. It has to be a government agency. We're hoping for a 90-day turnaround, and that would give us another $850,000 in potential funding to support our application or our effort to get new service. And we continue to meet with network planners. We have the Roots Americas Conference, which actually, as of 2 minutes before our meeting, moved to June in Orlando. It won't be in May. And that is entirely because it's run by a company in the UK, and they've just been informed their lockdown is being extended. We have our own Volaire Aviation Consulting Forum. That one is for sure in August in St. Augustine, Florida. And we will be continuing our headquarter meeting tour as planners return to offices, which is happening every day. More of them are returning to offices as they get their vaccinations and as offices reopen. So I would end with, and I can stop the screen share. The key to getting this done, as Angie mentioned at the beginning, is for us to reduce risk. The less risk that we represent, the more likely it is to secure service and for an airline to try something that in this market would represent potentially extreme risk relative to just adding a flight in a market that's been reduced in frequency. So we've got to have a sufficient guarantee in place to back up and to offset the risk of a carrier coming into the market. And for those unfamiliar, a guarantee is simply money that sits on the side as an airline operates service. If they lose money against their target revenue, we reimburse the difference. If they make money, we don't owe anything. So it's a simple calculation that lasts for 2 years. I will say we've had, as Angie mentioned, a number of new routes start this year. Routes that started in the fall before demand came back, we were seeing cash burn of around $200,000 per month. So, it would only take 10 months to burn through $2 million in the pandemic environment. So beyond having that risk mitigation available, we've got to have people on the planes. And so that's why it's really important that we don't start too soon either. We want to understand that Oregon is open. Oregon is ready for people to come here, and our businesses are traveling. Our research shows after multiple surveys, about 75% of previous business demand is likely to return post-pandemic. If that is the case, we will be fine with 2, 3, 4, even 10 flights a day. So I have no doubt our market can support the service, but it's important that we get the service going at a time when we know people are going to be on the plane. And so with that, I think we will take questions, and Brent, I'll throw it back to you.
Terrific, thank you. I did get one from Ed, which I had to resist not answering for. I thought I'd throw it your way. And I have a couple questions myself. So he said, to avoid multiple connections for a single flight, won't Salem routes have to include flights to multiple connection airports, unlike Delta did with Salt Lake City?
Exactly. So that's a great point. That's why we've chosen our targets the way we have. San Francisco United is a huge hub. United operates, post or pre-pandemic, they operated 120 cities from San Francisco. So we would have connections to virtually that entire network. Denver, same story. Seattle and Alaska, same story. So all of our network service we are looking at is connecting service that will get you to multiple destinations with one stop, a single stop, not a double stop, on one ticket with no hassle.
Yeah, and we totally understand, and maybe Jack, you can touch on, please, the amount of passenger demand, and we'll call post or pre-pandemic, we need to switch to fly out of Salem, because we know that Salem won't be the right answer for everybody. If they're going, nonstop to Toronto, they may not want to fly out of Salem. So it's not going to be the right solution for everyone. However, we don't need everyone to pick Salem.
That's just it.
of the
Our
business.
market is sufficiently large. We've got over 1,000 people a day each way before the pandemic. Say 75% comes back. We still have between 800 and 900 people a day each way who travel in and out of Salem. We needed, before the pandemic, to retain somewhere on the order of 7% of our traffic to fill 100% of the seats. We don't need to fill 100%. We need to fill 80 to 85% of the seats. So if we post-pandemic retain 12% was our math, we would need more flights than what we're talking about here just to handle that demand. And that's if we don't generate any new trips that people naturally take when it's easier to fly out of their community, or new tourist trips that people naturally take when it's easy to go see a new place that I hadn't thought about going and visiting before. And so that is always a factor that we look at too. The market is sufficiently large that even if we only retain a small portion, and many people keep driving to Portland, we can support it. The last thing I would note is our most recent market research shows that the number of people driving to Eugene has doubled in the last 2 years from Salem. So what's happening, and that's despite the fact the fare is higher in Eugene than it is in Portland. What's happening is that more people are driving to Eugene because the drive to Portland is getting unwieldy. The traffic is getting worse. It's getting unpredictable. It's getting difficult. So people are saying, I can't mess with driving to PDX. I am going to do the thing that's easy. That behavior change shows us that it will be much easier to pull people to Salem than it may have been 4 or 5 years ago.
I'm going to quote Jack Penning, actually, in your first presentation to the community. You put it really in a striking manner. When you say 12%, that means everybody who does get on an airplane, if 1 out of 8 times they fly, they go Salem instead of Portland, then we're a success.
Yeah, I
I
would have put it that way now.
Yeah, a lot of people were nodding in the rooms like, oh yeah, I don't always have to fly out of Salem, but if we do sometimes, there's enough passengers, even grabbing 1 out of 8 and telling to fly local. Next question from Jake. What's the soonest we could actually start seeing, realistically, commercial flights?
So if we had, I honestly believe if we had 1.5 million in the bank today, that we'd probably be looking at service starting in this summer. We don't have that. We've got to get to 7 figures just because with the amount of risk, no airline is going to take the risk against a $700,000 guarantee. It's not enough to back them up. Even if we're 100% confident, it's not going to make them 100% confident. Assuming we win our grant proposal, which is a very, very strong proposal, but the best proposals aren't always awarded. There are political considerations, but assuming we win our grant proposal, that would be sometime in the summer. We probably would defer service start until next spring or summer of 2022 to ensure we're starting at a time of peak traffic. I have had a number of markets start between October and January because we get an award in June and the airline's ready to go. Invariably, the markets that start in those time periods lose chunks of their guarantee. Doesn't mean they're unsuccessful, but they always lose a chunk because no one travels in early November before Thanksgiving. No one travels in the first 2 weeks of December. So you're going to be paying out guarantees on those flights. But once we get to spring break, we have sustained high level of demand all the way until Labor Day that can kind of carry us through. So if I were to say, honestly, where I think the soonest is, this long way of saying it, I think would be March of 2022, but probably more likely June of 22.
Which hopefully, of course, correspond with the pandemic waning and passenger demands sailing up, right? Because we need that in addition to it being high season. I have a question. You were speaking of Allegiant. Allegiant is one of the 2 airlines that's shown the most interest. They came back and asked for additional information. They picked up some routes out of Portland that Alaska had canceled, is where they decided to put their resources this last winter. Are we in a situation, is Allegiant in a situation where they're going to start training more Metro people to fly Allegiant? So this is coming from let me back up. They have a 0 cost situation out of Portland for these new markets. When that ends, will we see more attractive even for their metro clients to fly out of Salem, because our cost per departure per enplanement is so much lower.
Yeah, so Allegiant doesn't generally have what we would call loyal flyers. Allegiant has flyers who maybe would have driven or wouldn't have taken a trip otherwise, because the ultra low fares stimulate new traffic. Now they are, as you mentioned, in Portland doing something very smart, and they're adding 3 markets that Alaska used to fly. So they know there's built-in traffic, and that built-in traffic doesn't really care what airline they get on. And so they'll be able to grab it all. So very, very smart, but it's a much different strategy than what we're talking to Allegiant about. What we're talking to Allegiant about is the core of their strategy, which is we take people from smaller metro areas and take them to vacation destinations. So I think that, I don't ever see Salem, Idaho Falls, or Salem, Monterey flying on Allegiant, which is what they're flying out of Portland. What I do see in Salem is Las Vegas and Phoenix and LA and San Diego and Tucson, the Palm Springs, the larger vacation destinations in the West. The only real, so in other words, I can see them serving both side by side. They serve airports side by side all over the country. And what I don't think that they will do, though, is move Portland things to Salem. I think they would try to run 2 different strategies in Western Oregon. They'll do in Salem what they do in Eugene today. And Portland will be more of a base, because what they're trying to do in Portland pretty much is get those people from Idaho Falls and Monterey and Santa Maria up to the Northwest for summer vacation. So it's just a different strategy. The only thing we will compete with Portland for with Allegiant is what we're competing with every other Allegiant market for, and that is the aircraft resource. So it's a matter of where can I make the most money with this plane using these hours of operation. That's the entire calculation. It helps us tremendously that our long-term costs are so incredibly low, pennies on the dollar, because on the same fare, you make a lot more money in Salem.
And they're flying the places we want to go. Those are our top markets: Las Vegas, LA Basin, Phoenix, and they're flying successfully out of Medford and Eugene. Another question that popped in my head, when you talked about passenger demand and how much is lost, what percentage of our catchment area was international flights, or do we know that split?
We have it. I can pull it up exact, but I'll give it. So it's less than 10%. It was between 7 and 8% of our traffic before the pandemic was international. Normally on something like a San Francisco, you want to be able to show you have a lot of Asia traffic that can connect at San Francisco. After the pandemic, we're actually in a much better position than heavy international markets, because that international traffic is going to take years and years to come back. In all likelihood, there are going to be international lockdowns or border closures well into 2023, because it's going to take so long for all countries to catch up on vaccination. The poor countries simply won't be able to afford it until the price comes way down. And so with that, domestic traffic is more important than it ever was before. And that's our forte. Like Brent says, large proportions of our traffic is going to the LA Basin, it's going to the Bay Area, it's going to Phoenix, it's going to Las Vegas, it's going to Denver. These are markets that easily connect at San Francisco. They operate relatively relatively high frequency even during the pandemic. So there's a lot of flights to connect to. It's not a bad connection. There's a lot of opportunity in domestic right now that there wasn't before the pandemic started.
One thing I'm not sure even Jack is familiar, but we do have Tokyo International University here and in partnership with Willamette, and also a soy and teriyaki sauce manufacturer with a Japanese home company. So if we're going to fly, I mean, potentially when international comes back, fly Salem, San Francisco, Narita.
Absolutely. Or Haneda. There's San Francisco Haneda too, which is the airport close in Tokyo. And that kind of traffic, so Japan traffic will probably come back pretty quickly because Japan not only has the virus, for all intents and purposes, totally under control, but they will open once it's clear that our vaccination level is high. So that's one that will be valuable quickly.
Okay, this is a question I'd like maybe Jack. We'll throw it out to the panelists, to Tom Hoffert, to Eric Anderson, Angie to weigh in terms of, it's kind of a loaded question. Thank you, Carol, for it. What can local businesses do to help get this going? What do we have to do as far as the local business, the local economic development, and so forth? I know I have my answer, but I'd like to hear from Angie, Tom, Eric, anybody wants to weigh in. Or do you want Jack to go first?
I was going to let you guys talk. It's your community. I want you guys to talk.
I know Angie will talk about the energy later, and that's obvious to us, and we'll cycle back to her. My first answer is we need a little bit more community champion situation. We have had some very prominent names, help launch this, from Dick Withnell and others, and Michael Roth and so forth. It would be nice to have a political champion. It would be nice to have the mayor making it a point that I'm not stopping being mayor till we have this, a Senate president, a US representative. As far as us and our effort from Fly Salem, I think that's a piece that would help us and help drive more political and public awareness.
Yeah, Brent, I think the continued education of our entire business community is very important in this process. When we look at the pandemic, businesses really went into a focus of self-preservation, rightfully so. And so as we start to continue to educate ourselves and see the light at the end of the tunnel becoming a little more present in our lives, it's a great time to reconnect with our businesses and provide a real hopeful and optimistic look into a resource. And I really do look at commercial air service as a resource for our city to be taking advantage of the education process and getting people excited about having another crown jewel in our community. This has great impact for the wineries and tourism in our area. There are dollars brought into our community through an effort like this that is not often looked about. We're often inflective and we say, hey, how will I use this service? And the reality is, for a healthy community to complete that economic ecosystem, we need all parts of our community contributing. And to be able to bring in individuals into this market, to be able to go to the coast, to be able to go to the mountains, to utilize what Salem has just naturally right around us, it can be a very big economic boon for this community. And so our city council, and I invite, of course, our county commissioners in both Marion and Polk County. By the way, full credit to Polk County commissioners and the Marion County commissioners for very much being behind this effort and their great leadership, to continue to have our elected officials see this really for the potential that it is. And that is to create a great foundation for our city to have but one more revenue source coming in, guests enjoying all the natural beauty and livability that makes this valley so special. And so I'm excited about the education process. And as we start to build momentum forward, I think we can count on a business community that really sees the great asset that commercial air service brings into the Salem area.
Thank you, Tom. I know we all know that there are conferences and conventions that we are not getting because we're X number of miles away from a major airport. We know that there are employers who are not locating here because they don't want to be more than 50 miles away from air service and so forth. And we also know that people who are spending money in the community leave the community to be closer to the metro and PDX for their room nights, for their car rentals, for their dinners and so forth, where otherwise they would stay in Salem. So you add those three things together with Tom's comments on tourism and Angie's world, it's significant. And Angie, your comment about dropping a Fortune 500 company in the middle of the Mid-Valley is powerful. So political champion, awareness, education, and Angie, you're up.
Actually, can I just, before Angie,
right. Yes, please.
No, I would just also add, I think Tom did a really good job of summarizing, but I think with the original question around what the business community can do also is to be sure that their voice is being heard. I mean, I think having folks participate in events like this, so they're learning what the opportunities are, that they're telling us that they need this. You know, we talk to folks on a regular basis and ask them where they, what they need, what kind of, air service are they looking for? How much of it does it, make a difference for them from the perspective of going to corporate headquarters, bringing in consultants, doing finding new employees that need to have connectivity. I think the more that we can do to get the business community to be vocal and what they, if they see a need for this, there's opportunities to certainly invest in the future of Fly Salem, but also I think minimally just have a voice and be vocal about supporting it and connect with any of us here on the panel to say, yes, we're interested, keep us posted. Here's how we would use this, use our names. We have several members that have been involved in that regard, and they do represent good employers in the community, but the more the merrier. I think we need to have that voice pretty consistently vocal and loud.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, you guys. Yeah, I totally agree. Obviously, it's going to take a village to make this happen. And we've had tremendous support, really, to get us to the $700,000 in pledges from all corners of our communities. And there's a lot of excitement. And we just need to keep that momentum going. Obviously, we've all had to focus on the pandemic and keeping our families and our employees, our communities, our neighbors safe. And doing what we can to get through this. And then we were hit with the wildfires. We've been hit with the ice storm. Our communities have gone through so much. So now is really not the time for me to say, oh, please pony up, but and join the tribe that's working to get this done. But we know that when you can, you will. And our community, unlike many other markets that are going for commercial air service, where they have support primarily from their government entities, our market has support primarily from our local folks, our individuals, and our businesses. And that speaks really loudly about our community's commitment to this effort and that they will use this service. Obviously, we'd love to have support from our cities and our counties to help us to get this done as well. I think it would be a wonderful collaborative effort, and we're going to continue to have those conversations. But when it's time and when it's right, when the skies clear a little bit, we'll be ready to have further conversations with all of you about trying to get this done together. But if you do have questions or you are interested in making a pledge, please contact me anytime. I'd love to hear from you. And the way it would work, and Brent, you're going to have to keep me straight on this, is that we're taking pledges, and those pledges that before the airline commits will need to turn into cash. And Travel Salem will be the bank on that, and we'll be banking through Pioneer Trust Bank and carefully shepherding those dollars toward this effort. So, but there's a lot of momentum. There's so much potential, and we only need one carrier to commit. When one carrier commits, the others will come. So other markets that are similar in size to us, like San Luis Obispo, I believe Jack has 11 flights a day. Maybe not anymore, but they did.
They have about 11 now. They're up close to 20 departures a day.
Oh my gosh.
Before the pandemic.
So we could blow that out of the sky. Our market is ripe and ready to go. So there's so much potential. We just need to secure one carrier, and then it will happen very organically. So I want to thank everybody for being a part of this conversation today. It continues. It's not just now. So if you have other questions, you can reach out to me or anybody else that's on this panel, and we'll do our best to get your answers back to you. But I really want to thank Jack for being with us today. You're our champion out there trying to shake the trees and make it happen with all your influence and your relationships. And this is a relationship business. It's obviously about numbers. It has to shake out, but you have to know who to talk to in the right time to get it done. So thanks for your leadership and your vision to help us move this forward, Jack.
It's my pleasure. This one's a bit of a, it's one of those markets, since I'm an Oregonian and I've lived in Oregon for 23 years now. This is one that has particular importance for me, and so I'm hopeful we will get something done.
Definitely.
Just
Brent, you want to round us out?
Yes, thanks for the comments, Angie. I think you're exactly right. I'm a firm believer that when we fill those 50 seat planes and fill them over and over again, that will lead to the next. We as a community, back to what is the community going to do? When we get service, not if, but when we get service, we need to make a point of supporting it. Because for some people, a connection to the east is right. For some people, Alaska to Seattle is right. And we only get that by going out of our way to support the service, pay more for the ticket, connect out of Salem to San Francisco or Denver, or wherever we get our first service, and make it successful so that we can roll that snowball downhill, right? So doing well out of San Francisco, do whatever we have to do to support that will get us LA or Las Vegas or Seattle or Denver down the road. Our 5-year version, don't say 10, Jack. Our 5-year, we would love to see us going Bay Area, LA Basin, a connection to the East Coast, and Seattle. You talk about the power that's going to be it's not going to be 2 50-seat aircraft to San Francisco. That's not where we're stopping. So we do need to get the first one and then support the heck out of it.
And Jack, I can't remember. There's a slide that you've shown that we showed to SkyWest that showed Salem's ranking in like over Puerto Rico, or I can't remember, like we're like in the very top echelon of if airlines are looking at where they should start service, we're the #1 market.
Yeah, so our market is the largest to San Francisco that doesn't have a nonstop flight to San Francisco. And we're one of the largest to Denver. We're one of the largest to Salem. So as you look down a list of potential opportunities, Salem ranks very high. Now, keep in mind, we're also competing with things that aren't on that list, because an airline can take a plane and operate a 5th flight a day from San Francisco to Medford instead of starting new service from San Francisco to Salem. So we have to compete against not only the new markets that want service, but also the current markets who want more flights per day. And so it's a constant battle. And that's why it's so important that we have the leadership that we've had from Brent and from Angie and from Tom and from all of those in the community who have been behind this from day one, because we have to stay in front of these airlines constantly. I do that. I talk to our target carriers at least once a week, but I'm talking about lots of different things that are going on. It makes a big difference when I'm there joined by Angie and Brent and Tom. And we've been doing a really good job of that, but that's going to have to continue to bring this home.
And with a minute to spare before the hour is up, I think we're done. Any further questions? Tom is ready to go. Thank you, everyone. Spread the word, and we'll make it available to all of your board members that were not able to join us.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Florida. Have a great day.
Thank you.